Good evening, everyone. Time for another silver update. This is the 1 hour chart of silver provided by netdania.com. You can click on the link below. Now you can see here the reload of the MACD on the 1 hour that I had been pointing out for the last couple of days is actually starting to round off. We had that rally where we crossed 35, but we didn't get a continuation on that rally. So that is interesting, to say the least. We may get some news tomorrow. If we pull out to the 2 hour, you can see that we're just bouncing off the zero line and going up. So we may roll over, we may continue higher. I was expecting that test back to 34 and a rally, and I expected it to break out through that 35 and continue. It did not. So if we pull up the volume, now you have to remember the volume is very dicey on NetDania and any indicators that use volume from the futures, and that's going to be combined with volume from Globex, other trading systems. So it's going to be dicey because you have these months rolling off, and so it's very hard to get true volume information. You can see the big volume spike was on the Bernanke speech, but we were really kind of tapering off on volume. So we're starting to get that rollover, and that would indicate that the oversold position, actually it's on the daily, the oversold is starting to get a rollover. So we may actually get that move down that some have been predicting. I'm still leaning on the upside, at least a test of that 37.50, but I may end up being wrong on that, and we're going to roll down and have to come up at a later time to test that. It all depends on world events, and that's going to be the main topic of the night once we deal with some of the questions. This is going to be a real tinfoil hat episode, so if you're not into conspiracies, you probably want to tune out now, because this is going to get very deep down the rabbit hole. But before we do that, let's take a look at the questions from the blog. From the forum. And the first one, I've pledged to myself that I'm not going to go into Bitcoin because a lot of silver stackers are against Bitcoin. I don't want to anger my audience, but I'm probably in the near future going to revive my Bitcoin channel and do a refutation of this article that was on the Daily Bell. Very interesting article about how the people behind Bitcoin may be the powers that be. So very interesting. I don't agree with it, but I'll have to do a full refutation on my Bitcoin channel. This is a question from George Silver. A question of faith. Dear Brother John, my question is about faith, not faith in religion, but faith in silver. I see the potential of silver as an investment and as a commodity, but not as a coin like a gold coin. My holdings in precious metals are primarily in silver. This silver is in large, good delivery LBMA bars, very little in silver coins. I have gold coins, and I see them in my mind's eye as having real intrinsic value. Their value seems to me to be their untarnishable beauty. The secret to this value is their simple purpose of being a rare store of value and of not being something that has multiple personalities like silver. Silver coins to me do not hold the same pure purpose. Maybe you can change my mind, but I can't help feeling that when this precious metal race has run its course, gold coins will still be held by many. Silver coins will be melted down and used in industry. Very interesting question, something I deal with a lot, and we're actually going to go to, when we go to the tinfoil hat moment, we're going to talk about FOFOA, who's of the free gold movement. I'm of the opinion that silver is actually better than gold as far as investment return. Now, it's interesting that George Silver points out that the unique thing that gold has that silver doesn't is that untarnishability. Now, that's not really a negative if you understand it. Silver tarnishes, yes, but it doesn't take away any of the metal. Gold is found at the bottom of the sea and it has its luster, but silver can oxidize. That can be taken away very quickly. I have a Canadian maple that I left out in the air, and it's now got all kinds of crazy copper colors to it. But that's something that's recognized with silver. It's actually, when you start to look at your rainbow Morgans, it's actually a collector's item when you look at some of the beautiful rainbow patterns. So for me, that's not really anything to take away from silver. Now, the other point is that silver has these multiple personalities. Well, I don't see that as a negative. I actually see that as a positive. The fact that silver is required to be used for so many industrial uses, whereas it's also a precious metal, just means that much more demand in my mind for silver. If you think about silver in the history of the world pre-1940, there really is no distinguishing between silver and gold as far as its precious metal store of value. That's its primary purpose, and it was just because of the Comstock lode and other historical anomalies that have to do with Western discoveries that caused the gold-silver ratio to skew to such an extent that we had the crime of 1873 and the subsequent demonetization of silver. So I have to disagree with George Silver on that point. I actually believe that silver is much more valuable because of this multiple personality aspect. And the last question I'm going to deal with, this is from Two-Headed Boy. Is there still hope for the little guy? Brother John, thank you for the time and effort that you put into your excellent videos and blog. About 18 months ago, I became interested in silver after a tip from a friend regarding a silver mining stock. As I began to research the company, I became fascinated by the silver story. I found you, SGT Bull, and I'm now convinced the fundamentals and consider myself a stacker. Frequently, in your videos and on various blogs and websites, I hear about stackers buying monster boxes of this coin, Yeti boxes of that coin, and if I'm honest, it begins to get me down. I simply do not have the cash to do this. I've tried to spread the word of silver to my family and friends, who often argue that to truly make it worthwhile, one must be prepared to commit large sums of money into accruing large quantities of silver, and that's not feasible for the average guy. My question is, are my friends right? Is it ridiculous for me to be rather proud of the paltry 20 ounces of silver I have stored away? When the fan gets hit, will what I have make the difference? I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance and some ammunition next time this topic comes up amongst my friends. Is there still hope for the little guy with a pocket full of silver? Many thanks for your time and reading, etc. Well, that's an interesting way to put it. I don't really understand it because I come from a different perspective. Something similar to the point that it's not how much money you earn, but it's how much money you save. In other words, your ability, there are many people who make $300,000 a year who are on the road to bankruptcy because they spend so much more than they earn, whereas there are many people who make only $50,000 a year and live on 25. Those people have the ability to stack $25,000 worth of silver a year, and I think those people will probably end up being very, very wealthy in the future. So there's nothing wrong with just having 20 ounces of silver. You can still buy a silver dime for around $2, $2 to $2.50, and it doesn't have to do with the size. It's kind of like Bitcoin. It doesn't matter what the denomination is. The zeros can go out to infinity. So the question is, are you saving your money in silver? And I don't think there's any reason to be discouraged. If we took this 20-ounce figure here and we multiplied that by 100 million, we're going to get roughly 2 billion ounces. We know that if just the little guys together stacked 2 billion ounces, and that's 1/3 of our population just in the United States. If just 1/3 of the population who are little guys stack these 20 ounces in a year, that's 2 billion ounces. That would break the back of the powers that be. So, no, I couldn't disagree more. The little guy is the guy that I think everything is riding on. It's a matter of him being able to convince his friends as to the fact that this is a very valuable thing to do. So let's get to the main topic of the night, and that's going to be the Arab fall. Now, I've held off on commenting on this. We have stories that are hitting us fast and furious. If you go to my blog, I posted on the 14th a link to the World Muslim Protest Map. This is something you can't really miss that's going on worldwide. And if you click on this now, if you take a close look at this, you can see the number. I'm going to click on this. It's going to take us to a live view on Google Maps, and you can see that it is spreading. It's pretty much, if we pull out, you can see it's pretty much isolated to this Arab crescent, or Muslim crescent as some have called it. But the big question that people are asking is, what is behind this? What does this mean? And again, this is going to be tinfoil hat down the rabbit hole, so I'm going to give you my take on what I believe is going on here. Now, the first thing I want to look at, this is lyrics from a song called Riot. It's from the Dead Kennedys. That's what I would say is a conspiracy rock band, and it's a band I was into when I was in my early days, but they're a conspiracy-based band that their lyrics, I've posted many of them in the past to the blog, and there's some very deep insight. Anytime you go to the far left or to the far right, you're going to see some very deep insight. Of course, in the middle, you're going to see nothing but pablum. So let's look at the lyrics here, because I want to apply them to what we're looking at in the world today. Rioting, the unbeatable high, adrenaline shoots your nerves to the sky. Everyone knows this town is going to blow, and it's all going to blow right now. Now you can smash all the windows that you want. All you really need are some friends and a rock. Throwing a brick never felt so damn good. Smash more glass, scream with a laugh, and wallow with the crowds watching them kicking people's ass. But you get to the place where the real slave drivers live. It's walled off by the riot squad, aiming guns right at your head. So you turn right around and play right into their hands and set your own neighborhood burning to the ground instead. So with that as an introduction, I want to play you the latest Lindsey Williams. And I'm going to play this first and give you an introduction into Lindsey Williams. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. Lindsey Williams was the pastor to the oil pipeline up in Alaska, and I'm going to play this first and then give a comment.
What you're going to hear comes directly from the elite. Yes, you heard me correctly. By the providence of God, I had the privilege of being able to keep in touch with some of these people over the years. They're now in their 70s and 80s. They tell me things that are going on behind closed doors. And on September the 6th, that's right, Thursday, September the 6th, during the time of the Democratic Convention, more than likely will signal in coming days the most significant day in the history of the American dollar, because on that day, China announced. Now, she's been planning this for some time, trying to set all this up. But she officially announced on that date that any country in the world that would like to use the Chinese currency for the sale and trade of crude oil could do so. Folks, this, I hope that you're seeing, and in the next few minutes you'll understand the depth of what's taking place. Now, the very following day, on Friday, September the 7th, September the 7th, Russia announced that she will sell China all the crude oil that China needs. It's no limit whatsoever. And Russia said, we will not use the American dollar for sale and trade of that crude oil. Now, you must realize that Russia, as of last year, became the number one supplier of crude oil on the face of the earth, bypassing Saudi Arabia because of their coal ST3 wells.
Okay, so let's stop here because that gets us to the main point. Now, to understand Lindsey Williams, you need to understand that Lindsey Williams, if you take him at face value, and I do take him at face value, I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but I do trust his information. I do believe he's telling the truth. Now, the crux of what Lindsey Williams has always said is, if you remember, his first book was the Energy Non-Crisis. The idea was that he learned from being on the Alaska pipeline and being involved in Prudhoe Bay and the other islands that he talks about, that there's a tremendous amount of capped wells in the United States. Now, I'm not going to get into the non-organic or non-aerobic or whatever the terms are for the oil production. I tend to side with those who believe that oil is actually not a organic based product, but actually is much more plentiful all the way around the globe, and that we've probably been led to believe a lie. But that's taking it too far aside. But you have to understand that what Lindsey Williams is saying is that the petrodollar system was a system created by these elites for the purpose of controlling, one, the resources of the oil-producing nations and extracting them, and two, for controlling world currency, and three, for ultimately, and this is what I'm going to try to show you, bankrupting those nations and then leaving them with nothing. Now, the next thing I want to take you to is FOFOA, because this is going to be a big piece in the puzzle. If you know who FOFOA is, he's friend of another. Friend of another, FOA, was a poster who came on the Kitco boards in roughly the late 90s to 2000 and gave a story, supposedly an insider, about the fact that a large amount of gold was being transferred to the Middle Eastern nations because they weren't satisfied with petrodollar recycling. So for that reason, and for the reason that they wanted to continue the game going, that there was a subtle transfer, an unrecorded transfer of precious metals to the Middle Eastern nations by the powers that be to be able to keep the petrodollar game going. Now, as we've seen under the Arab Spring, we have seen the toppling of various regimes and what I will call the gold recycling from those nations. We had the toppling of Egypt, the toppling of Libya, the toppling of others. So, and apparently, at least reportedly, the gold has been stolen and taken back by the Western powers. But before I summarize this to try to explain where I'm coming from, let's take a look at the Google Earth map. And I've deliberately deleted all national boundaries and I've deleted all country names because I just want you to see what stands out very apparently from someone looking at Google Earth. You can see when we look at these regions that we have the North African region and the Middle Eastern region here. Then we have Europe, Russia, and then we have North and South America. Now, the first thing that's going to stand out to you when you look at North and South America, and these are going to be our UN ecological zones. This is Alaska up here, and this is the very heavy and dark Amazon rainforest in South America. These are essentially pristine areas of the globe with many, many natural resources. Whereas, again, when we look at these areas that are in the Arab Crescent, these are areas that are pretty much deserts. They really don't have the type of natural resources that we have in the West. These are areas that are dependent upon mining and oil. And as far as I know, the mining is really not there. It's pretty much the oil. So the reason I'm showing you this is to try to summarize all these things together. The wars that we've seen break out, actually, I would say this probably U.S. sponsored or at least intelligence-backed revolutions to topple dictators who've hoarded all the gold and then recycled that gold back to Europe and the United States. What we're looking at is the end of the petrodollar recycling system. Now, I don't think that Lindsey Williams really understands the import of what he is saying, but this is my take on it. The reason why the petrodollar recycling system and the FOFOA gold, or I'm sorry, the FOA gold recycling system is ending is because these nations are out of oil. They are being now discarded by the Western and Northern powers. They've had large populations build up, and unfortunately, many of these populations are radical Muslim populations. I'm not going to get into the Zionist and into the Islamic issue. That's an issue for another channel. But suffice it to say that there is a significant element of people in this area who are involved in violent protests. We can see that from the map. Now, it's my contention that the Western powers have decided it's now time to allow the rioting crowds to burn down their own neighborhoods. As they burn down the embassies, as they burn down their ability to trade with the rest of the world, they're really burning down their own neighborhood. And the fact that they are out of oil, in my opinion, probably means that the beginning of what some have termed the world genocide that the elites plan is probably going to begin in this desert area, because for the 40 years that the petrodollar recycling scheme has been in place, these areas have built up tremendous infrastructure, tremendous populations, tremendous dependency upon the Anglo-American petrodollar recycling system, which it appears that they're beginning to pull the plug on. And so if they pull the plug on this system, it's actually not going to be these green Western powers with many, many resources, and in my opinion, capped oil wells all through this area, and possibly alternative energy resources as well as natural gas and shale. It's actually going to be these areas that suffer the most, because the one thing they had is now gone. And so that is my opinion of what is behind all of this. Now, of course, the oil price is starting to fall. I don't know how that fits in with the scenario, but I do believe that the Western powers actually have a very large cache of oil and other energy resources, and they have decided at this point to pull the plug on their petrodollar recycling system. They have already recycled the gold that FOA has documented flowed there by overturning their dictators that they control there. They've recycled the gold back into London, Europe, and the United States, and the oil is pretty much dry, so there's really no more reason to milk these countries, and it's time to let the riots loose and let them burn down their own neighborhoods. And we'll talk to you next time.